Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our three speakers, Christian, Erida, and Esteban, for the Autonomous Agents in Business Central.
It's exciting to be here. We have Esteban and Erida, and I'm Christian, and we are going to talk about autonomous agents in Business Central, or AI agents, or autonomous AI agents, or just agents. We call them different things, but they are the same. So we are going to cover a few things. We're going to talk about what are agents really, to give you an intuition about what they are and what they can do. We will, of course, demo our first two agents, Sales Order Agent and Payables Agent, in more detail than in the keynote today. And then we will go a lot under the hood to show you how they really work. Again, we hope you will leave the session with an understanding of what they are, what they can do, where Business Central is headed with agents. Okay, let's start with talking about or reflecting over what is an AI agent. And here I'm going to draw upon a concept from philosophy. I have a link from Wikipedia because I'm going to show you a couple of quotes. Let's start with the first one. Human agency entails the claim that humans make decisions and enact them on the world. So there's this claim that humans have a free will, they have options, they can choose for themselves what they want to do. And when they make a decision, they enact them on the world. So I think what this means is more the physical enactment, taking action, taking real action, which is more than just information exchange, it's more than just chat. It's actually doing something that has a lasting impact in the world. Another quote, an agent typically has awareness of their physical activity and the goal that the activity is aimed at realizing. So agents know what they're doing, they can see, they can reflect on themselves, they can sense the environment, they can see what impact they're having on the environment. There's also this idea of a goal. So the agent is pursuing a goal and is taking actions to get closer and closer to that goal. As humans, we all have agency. Imagine I wanted to leave this room now. What would I do? I would sense my environment. I would see there's a exit there, there's some exits here. I would then use my intelligence, my free will, to make a decision. Let's say I wanted to go out that exit. Now that becomes a more tangible goal that I would try to pursue. And so I start to do activity that gets me closer and closer to that goal. But if something gets in my way, I'm free to change my mind. I have a free will, I can choose to go out one of the other exits. That's for human agency. How do we translate that to AI? Well, AI agents can sense the environment in the digital world. They can make decisions. We actually empower them. We give them flexibility to make their own decisions quite a lot, as you will see. And they have intelligence through LLMs, which is important because the decisions that they make would probably not be as good unless if they didn't have intelligence. So what do, these agents? They pursue goals, and the goals are set by humans. How do they achieve those goals? As I said before, it's actually up to the agent. The agent decides on its own, uses its free will to decide on how it gets closer and closer to that goal. It might look like this. It might also look like this. So if you remember one thing from this slide, it should be that AI agents are goal-oriented, goal-seeking. They have options and they try to do the best they can to get closer and closer to the goal. How do we support AI agents in Business Central? We think agents are actually very much like humans in many ways. One of the consequences of that has been that we have decided to represent them as users in the system. So they are users in the records in the user table. And as any other user, they have display name, username, permissions, profile. They also have a job description. Agents have a job. We all have jobs, right? We all have job descriptions. The difference is that our job descriptions are not written down. They're more a mutual understanding. Like we know what's our job, we know what's not our job. But for AI agents, we write it down. We write down, dear agent, this is your job. You're supposed to do this and this. Once we have an agent, we can delegate a task to it. Now that the agent has a goal, it will try to pursue that goal. How does it do it? What options do we make available to these agents? What resources do we make available? We make the whole Business Central user interface available to these agents. They will actually log into Business Central and navigate the UI, operate the UI, open pages, fill out fields, close the page again, all of that, same as what humans are doing. Let's drill a little bit deeper into the last point here. Here's an illustration of Susan, who is a Business Central user. She uses the browser to connect to Business Central. When she presses a button, a web service call will be made to the Business Central online service, where it will reach an API that we call the Logical UI API. This is an API, like many others, using JSON, but it is designed in a way to power a UI, so it has everything that is needed to render the UI in the browser. It has operations for all the things that Susan can do, press buttons, set field values, etc., etc. So when Susan presses the button, the web service call goes to the web server, response comes back, and then on the browser it is converted to HTML, so it renders nicely for Susan. This is how Susan operates the Business Central user interface. How do agents operate the Business Central user interface? Well, they call the same API. What this means is agents can see and do everything that Susan can see and do. It will actually log in to the Business Central UI, and it will actually press buttons and navigate just like a human would. Just not using HTML, using JSON. That's just the technicality. So you can see the AI agent is not inside of Susan's session. It's separated, just like a colleague. So it's really more like a colleague. They work side by side, asynchronously from each other. So when the agent logs in, it will see the role center. It has a goal, remember, it has a task, so it has a goal that it wants to pursue. And maybe it will look at that role center and say, I think the next thing I want to do is click that button that is called sales orders. So it does. And the response comes back from the web server with a list of sales orders from the sales order list page. And then what will it do? It might think, I need to press the first link there to open the first sales order. And it does that. And the response comes back and with all the details about the sales order, etc., etc. So this is how it works. It's really like a user in many ways. But enough talk. Let's have a look at our first agent, the sales order agent, to see how it looks in real life.
Yep. Thank you, Christian. So we're talking about the sales order agent. Let's first start with a scenario of how sales orders work. Typically, many of them will come in as an order to your mailbox. So a customer will write in, sometimes with a very explicit, specific request listing all the items they need. Sometimes they just come in with a query like, do you have any chairs? And then a person in your team will be the one that is keeping an eye out on that mailbox and then checking if some email is coming in, picking up those emails as soon as possible, and then looking at the email, checking all those items that are requested, if they're available or not, making a draft quote out of that, and then preparing a response for the customer, sending that quote over, waiting for the customer to confirm, and at the very end, when that happens, we create a sales order. So it's a long manual process, and it's bound for automation, but not just any automation. And what we need in here is exactly that intelligent delegation, as Christian described agents, and that's exactly what the sales order agent comes in Business Central. It can be set up to monitor a shared mailbox for all those incoming sales inquiries, and then when a mail comes in, just based on that email, it can identify the right customer that is sending you this inquiry. It can check for item availability. Based on that, it drafts a quote. It even prepares a response for the customer, attaching that quote as a PDF to the response, sends it over to the customer with your confirmation, if that's how you set it up. And then when you receive the confirmation, it converts it to a sales order. And of course, above all this, it can also handle multi-turn conversation. So what that means is a customer changes their mind, they want to add an item to the quote, remove an item, change quantity, or something else. The agent can handle that and go back and forth with the customers and change the quote and the sales order as needed. It also can ask clarifying questions for those vague inquiries, as we said, where if you just ask, hey, do you have any chairs? It can go and find the chairs that you have available, if that's how you set it up, and then prepare a response with all that information and send it to the customer. At the very end, what is also very important to us at Microsoft is keeping the human in the loop and making sure that if you set it up like that, you will review any responses that are sent to the customer, or you will review the sales quote before they're sent over. So the sales order agent doesn't just do small tasks here and there. It understands the goal that was set to it, and it can handle that whole flow. It's your new teammate that is ready to act, tireless. It knows when to act, when to wait, when to ask for help. So that's a long intro and a long infomercial. Let's go and check it out in the product. So we start in Business Central. How do I set up an agent? Well, it's very, very simple. As soon as you log in, right into your role center, at the very top in here, you'll see that the avatar has been added. I hope it's big enough that you can see. And this agent is not yet activated or configured, so it's represented by this dashed line in the avatar and that plus sign right next to it. So if I want to activate it, what I'll do is I just press activate over here, and then it will open this configuration dialog. So we started the whole process of the sales order agent with the fact that it can monitor a shared mailbox, and we can very easily do that here where it says monitor incoming information. I'll just pick a mailbox that I've already set up in this environment. So that looks about good. And as you see, it's ready to activate. I can just update it and activate it. If you want to be a bit more granular with your setup, there's of course more things that you can have a look at, such as if I go to the next page, you can set up if you want to review, for example, all incoming messages, or just the first one, or no review at all from your senders, or think about item availability as you prepare those quotes. And what's next is, we also talked about the agent as a team member, right? It's not a copilot that you are using alone. Of course, if you want to, you can do that. But you really win in these situations when you allow your whole team to help, when you delegate tasks to them. And you can do that right here in the configuration dialog by managing user access. And right now, I'm the only one that has access to this agent because I'm the one configuring it. But of course, I can add Christian over here or Esteban to also be able to work with the agents and look at its tasks and help it if needed. So as it is now, they can just look at the tasks and help there. But if I want them to be able to also configure the agent with things that I'm doing right now, like setting up the mailbox or those granular properties, I can give them permission to also configure it. And it's really that simple. Now the agent will be running and checking my mailbox and just doing all of those processes in the background. So, agent setup done and dusted. I have another environment where the agent has already been configured, and I think some emails have come in, so let's just go and switch and have a look at that. So yet again, you see this is the new environment. There's a couple more avatars right here, as we said before, and the one that has the initials SO, which is the sales order agent, has this red dot with a number on it, which is quite a familiar UX scenario for all of us with all the apps on our phones. When they need our attention, when there's any notifications, there's just that little dot telling you, hey, come have a look, I need your help. So what you need to do now is just click on that avatar, and the task pane will open up, and you'll see some information, of course, about what agent you're looking at the tasks of, and then that list of tasks. And you'll see that the tasks are also grouped. At the very top, you have the things that need your attention, so matched by those red dots, as we saw the red dot on the avatar. And then at the bottom is all the recent things, like things that your agent has worked on, tasks that are completed, tasks that have been stopped, tasks that are running, and a lot more. So if it needs your attention, it will be right there at the very top waiting for you. So let's get to the first task. There's an email from Alan Steiner. Let's have a look. So once I click on that task, what happens is we go to this timeline view where we can see everything that happened since the task was created and anything that the agent did after that. So I can see all of the steps, as I said, if I expand that group. And it all started with a message that was sent from Alan's. Let's click on that and have a look what the message is. So what you see is once I click on that page, on that step that's related to the incoming email, the page for the incoming email immediately shows up on the left, and that allows me to very quickly review all of the changes, all of the things happening with the task. So in this case, the incoming email is, as we said, from Alan, and the agent has already been able to identify the right contact based on that email and identify the right customer that contact is related to. So that's all good. Then if we have a little read-through of the email, we'll see that Alan is looking to refurnish their office, asking for 2 Antwerp conference tables and 20 Berlin chairs, and asking if they can be delivered on June 12th. So that all looks good. Let's go back to the timeline and see what the agent did after this. So you can see a bunch of steps that are already completed, as shown by the tick on the left, where it went to look for the items if they're available, then it created a sales quote, and it even populated that sales quote. If I click on that, what happens, as before, I am able to review things very easily because the right page just opens up immediately on the left, and I can see that this is the sales quote that was created for Damm Corporation, and a couple of the details that the agent put in. So it's that same customer that we talked about and the same contact, and we have the requested delivery date that the agent did pick up from that email that we read and filled it in the right field. And also, we have made a couple changes to the lines where we see those items that were requested are right here in the right quantities. So everything is looking great so far, and the agent did all of that without our help. What it needs our help for is reviewing this email that is ready to be sent. So if I click on that, I will see that we have a message that will be sent to Alan's once we confirm it. And the message body is beautifully written, thanking them for their request, listing the items that they asked for, listing the total amount, and even reconfirming that request delivery date over here as they specified it in the email. What we're saying is also that the sales quote that we have prepared is attached for their reference, and we can even view that right here. So if I show attachments, there's one, the sales quote, I open it up, and as we saw before, we can just preview this PDF right in Business Central and see all of those items that we mentioned before. So all of this is looking great. I think the agent did an excellent job. I didn't even have to move a finger besides click, confirm. That's it. My contribution to this task is done. So let's go and have a look at the other one. We have 2 remaining tasks. If we have a look at this one from Diane Prescott, maybe. So what's happening here is, similarly to the previous one, the task starts with an incoming email. Familiar concept. So she's writing that her sister is opening up a cafe that she's been dreaming about for years, and she'd like to order some coffee beans for the opening day. And a few more details, like 3 packs of beans from Ethiopia, some from Brazil, some from Colombia, all looking good. And again, the right customer and contact have been selected just from that incoming email, and it all looks great. And then the next steps are we have created the sales quote for that contact and added the items to the quote. Just a quick check on the quote, not that it's necessary, but yes, all the right items are there and it's the right customer. So while this all looks good, and the agent is now ready to send the message to Diane, I can see that there's also a step coming up in the future in the timeline, which is another message that is coming from Diane for the same task. And in the step that I have now, well, the agent has already drafted the response for Diane, but there's also a warning on this step. So if I click on it, you can see that the agent knows that a new message related to this task was received while this step was pending my review. And it's telling me that it's a good idea to maybe just review that other message that's coming in before I decide to confirm or discard this one. So that sounds good. Let's just go to the next step and have a look at that message that Diane sent to us. So it looks like Diane changed her mind. She would like to add some more items to the order. So 2 packs of the decaf beans from Colombia, because she just forgot about it, understandable. And also, she's saying that she heard that we offer gift wrapping. It would be very sweet for the grand opening, and that we should add that if possible. Sounds legit. Why not do it for Diane? So what I need to do now is, this email that was drafted doesn't really match the latest information that we have about this task. So I'll just discard this step because the agent needs to process that information that is coming in. So once I have discarded that, I have Diane's message that I read before, which I can just confirm because it is legit. And I'll tell the agent to just resume with the task so it updates all of that flow with the latest information that we have from that later incoming email. And you saw how this was the multi-turn conversation, right? Because as long as Diane replied to the same email thread as the one that she used for her initial inquiry, that message will go into the same task and not create a new one. Pretty neat. So while the agent is running this task, and I can see that here, and I don't need to work on it because the agent is working on it, I have one last task that needs my attention, and that is this one. Oh, and that was quick from Diane. So maybe we'll look at Diane's. I can see that the agent was very quick to draft another message for Diane, and let's just go and have a look at what that was. So actually, we see that we're thanking Diane for the update, so we have acknowledged that that new email came from her. We did add those 2 packs of decaf beans from Colombia as she requested, and also the gift wrapping. And you can see also that the sales quote PDF has been updated with these decaf beans. I can even zoom in a little and make it very clear that all the items I want are there. And then let's look at that gift wrapping, because I don't think that's a standard piece of information in a sales quote, right? So let's go and have a look at the sales quote. What did the agent do? Well, you can see that there's this field called gift wrap required, and it's set it to yes. And it's highlighting this field that is right here. So what this is, it's actually a field coming from an extension, not part of the sales quote page initially, just my extension. But the agent doesn't care where the field is coming from, as long as it has permission to that field. So it's just reading that JSON of the logical UI, as Christian mentioned, and it's able to interact with anything on the page, just as I would if I would be handling this task. We also have those changes to the lines, as we saw with the Colombia beans, and it's all looking pretty great. So I think the message looks good. The quote that was prepared and updated looks good as well. I'll just confirm, and that's also done and dusted. So the last task that I have is this email from Alicia Thumber. Let's go and have a look. Well, this one also has a warning, but it's a different one, right? If I click on it to have a look, then I can see that this is a message from Alicia, who's not a registered sender. And the warning from the agent is that this appears not to be related to the agent because it's a personal note, does not pertain to the agent's responsibilities, and that is actually correct. The email says, hey, heard you're in Antwerp presenting at BC TechDays, break a leg, haven't broken it yet. Want to catch up over lunch on Friday while you're still in town? Well, the agent doesn't need to worry about this. I'll talk to Alicia later. And I'll just stop that task, and all is done. So it was all very quick compared to having it done manually. And you can really have a look at all that by looking into the summary that we have for the agent, which you can either see here from this info icon, or if you hover on the sales order avatar, you see the same content with a little overview of what agent you're looking at, those initials, the state, and then a few crucial KPIs for the agent. So we have the number of received emails. I have activated my agent just a while ago, so there's not many of them, but it's 13. And just with these 13 emails that it received and processed, it saved me 1.1 hours. And this is an estimation based on the assumption that it saves up 3 minutes per email. And then from all of those emails, it has created 4 quotes, maybe because some of them we haven't heard back from the customers, some of them were unrelated, as the one I just stopped. And from just those 4 quotes, we have saved 24 minutes. Again, an estimation based on the assumption that we would use, say, 6 minutes per quote, filling in all those details, the right customer, the right items, the right quantities, and so on. So it's pretty great. And out of those quotes, I still haven't heard back from my customers, so I have no orders, but they would be here if I had any. And also, we would know what amount, including tax, the agent helps us make with all of these orders that it handles by itself, so to say. So that's all about the sales order agent. Let's hear how it works behind the scenes with Esteban. Tell us about the magic.
All right, thank you, Erida. Yes, so you just saw this whole new sort of pane and timeline experience for people using agents that we've built. But a lot revolving around agents is also just good old Business Central. So as you might expect, we do have agents as a list page and a table. So if we go to the agents list page, here we can see all the agents. You'll also notice, for example, this one is disabled and it shows up as the paused icon in the avatar. And let's have a look at the sales order agent, for example. So what Christian mentioned earlier and what you might be able to see here is that this agent card page sort of resembles the user card page, and that's because every agent record is directly tied to also an underlying user record. So every agent in BC is actually a user of a special agent type, but nevertheless it's still a user, and therefore permission sets and everything else you have with users apply, also the profiles. And there are some additional things that agents have that regular BC users don't have, like this user access that Erida showed you before when she was setting up the agent, where you define, okay, which users have access to which agents. And this is very important because every agent registered in the system and all these tasks, they don't have their own separate tables. So the user access here works as a row-level security for this data. This means that, for example, if Erida is given access to this sales order agent, but not some other agent in the system, then she cannot see that agent. So if she opens the agent's list page, even though it's reading from the same table, she cannot see the other agents, or if there's some AL code trying to do a find set or similar. This is all kind of restricted internally by the platform based on this user access, which makes it slightly different, let's say, than other traditional Business Central tables. And the permission sets and the profile are actually very important when you're creating an agent, because they are really responsible for the security and to a very large extent the accuracy of whatever agent you might build. Why don't we have a look at the sales order agent profile, for example? So I will just go to my user settings and I'll just change my role here. And let's go into that new profile. So something you might notice is this is actually very empty. A lot emptier than my own role center, and that's on purpose. So one way to really help the agent be very reliable at what it is tasked to do, is to make sure that it mainly just has access to the relevant pages and fields that that agent may need, because as Christian said, the agent will just see the UI like any other user, and it will make decisions and it will figure out how to get the job done. And you can assist it a lot by restricting what it can see and making it less likely that maybe it goes into places that it shouldn't. It also makes sense, for example, permission-wise, that maybe this agent has access to create quotes but not delete customer records, for example, right? So if we open a sales quote, you'll also notice it is actually quite simplified here. So this is all controlled by the profile. You'll see that the agent actually sees quite a few less actions and fields than a human would. And it's just trying to steer it into the right direction and making sure it really just has access to what it needs to. But of course, when you are building an agent, you are very welcome to play around with the profiles and role centers that fit your needs. So let's go back to the role center. Now, agents are sort of the starting point, right? Agents also have instructions. Unfortunately, instructions are not something I can show you in the card page for the sales order agent, but you're going to have to trust me that they're there. They're stored as part of the agent record, and they describe what the agent should do. And with all of that, the user access, the regular BC user setup, profile permissions, and the instructions, you have an agent. However, an agent on its own doesn't do anything, right? You have to ask it to do something. And how you ask it to do something is by creating agent tasks. So this is also just a table. And an agent task is basically the unit of work of an agent. You create a new task, the agent will do something. Now, tasks can have inputs and outputs, of course, like you saw in the sales order agent, but they don't have to. You could create an agent where the instructions are go to the customer list page, open the first customer, and set some field to some value, right? And it doesn't need any additional input. The instructions are pretty clear. It's not going to produce any output because, well, there's no conversation going on there. So that's also a completely valid task. But usually, the interesting part about tasks is the multi-turn conversational aspect, where not only can it have an input and an output, but it can have a sequence of inputs and outputs. It can really be a conversation, like you just saw with the sales order agent, where you might get an initial inquiry for some items, and then it replies, and you reply back to it, and you end up with multiple inputs and outputs. And that is where task messages come in. So these tasks you're seeing here are the exact same records, basically, that are displayed in the task pane view. We're just viewing them in the list page. And each of these have messages, and messages are what we use for input and output. So if we click on view messages, for example, you'll see that they have a type. There can be an input message or output message, who created this message. For example, some of them, the output ones are always created by the agent, and the input ones are created by a Yell code. And they also have a status. For example, here you can still trace this discarded message that Erida had back when she received a new email, and she kind of had to have the quote updated. So it is very important, though, when thinking about multi-turn, to think about the task, because the only way the multi-turn works is by making sure you're using the same task. And so whenever you want to build an agent that is conversational in nature, you have to make sure that you're also being able to find the task that already exists for a certain conversation and just add to that task, because all the other records outside of the agent itself are usually tied to a specific task, and all the context and memory that the agent has about what has happened here are part of individual tasks. There's a bit more of information here than what you might be able to see on the timeline. For example, we have log entries. And log entries are a more detailed, let's say, view of everything that the agent has done. So there's different types of, let's say, operations an agent can perform. Page operation is what we refer to every UI interaction. There's also the creation of output messages, the whole story around user interventions, like if the agent asks you to review something, for example, or it needs help. And in log entries, you can really see a lot more detail, for example, that it was on the item availability page, and invoked search with a particular set of keywords. It invoked a specific action on some specific page. And so this can be very useful for troubleshooting or auditing purposes, because it gives you a lot more detail than the timeline view, though usually users that are just regularly interacting with an agent will probably just tend to stick to the timeline view. And to kind of just bring home the point that everything is just a task, we have a special extension here that adds a few more actions. And I'll just create a task for this sales order agent. I'm not sending an actual email right now, but I will just say, yeah, put some message text here, and I'll pretend it's from Robert Towns and give it a title. And I'll just create a task. This action literally just inserts a task record and the message record via AL. And so you'll notice if I go back to my role center and refresh perhaps. Yes, you see the task is, this test task is now actually running. And the whole timeline experience is the exact same because everything you're seeing in the timeline is just really based on these agents, tasks, messages. And so everything else you get basically for free. So one thing that is also important to note here around agent permissions is that the agent does have permissions assigned to it. However, when a task is running, it will actually run with an intersection of permissions of the user who created the task or who last assisted with the task and the agent's permissions. This is to prevent any kind of elevation of privilege. So for example, I might create an agent that can create quotes, and then some user that isn't actually allowed to create quotes might somehow be added to the list of users for this agent. And we want to avoid these situations where users get the agent to do things for them that they themselves don't have permissions to do. So whenever the agent runs, it will always intersect its permissions with whichever user kind of last handled that task and run with both of those. Well, with the intersection of those. Yeah, so you can see everything here otherwise shows up the exact same. You can see the same sort of summary of the message and the fact that another message was created, etc. And now maybe let's have a look at some slides. So we just talked about agent and tasks and messages, and at the end of the day, this is all data, right? These are records in the database. We know an agent has permissions in a profile. Well, the agent user record has that. We have the instructions. And so creating an agent could boil down to going to an agent list page, clicking a new action, putting some data in, and then creating tasks just like I did manually via the UI. But of course, that's not really the expectation if someone wants to ship agents and being able to control their life cycle, update them, update the instructions periodically. And so the way to deliver agents is, as many of you might just guess, is by creating an agent application. The sales order agent is an app, and every other agent is also an app. And there's actually quite a bit that the agent applications are responsible for. This whole setup experience that Erida showed you, having a setup page, keeping track of that setup data, preparing your instructions based on the setup, maybe some of the options for configuring your agents influence that agent's instructions. All of this is kind of something that has to be handled by the agent application. We will, of course, provide various utilities to make it very easy to work with these agent records and tasks and various other commonly used things. But at the end of the day, there is quite some thought that has to go into creating an agent application. And let's have a bit of a look at the difference between what the agent application does and what the agent platform does when it comes to running a task. And we'll go with email as the example, because that's what you already saw with the order taker, and it's a fairly simple interaction. So we have two sides. We have the agent application, and then we have the agent platform. And so when a new mail comes in, the expectation is that the email integration part is actually handled by the application. The agent platform doesn't know how to read or send emails or use any other channel. It works with tasks, and it creates output messages and reads input messages, right? So here you probably would have some background tasks, some scheduled tasks running, periodically checking a mailbox perhaps, or you have a different system that just goes into BC. That's really up to the implementation, but let's say a new email has arrived. And so the first thing that the application has to do is to determine, well, is this a continuation of a conversation, or is this a new task, right? And for example, there's fields you can use on the agent task record that allow you to link that task to any external ID you want. It's a text field, so you can use that, for example, to check whether you have something for this Outlook conversation ID or any other system you're working with, and to find some correlation there. But it's very important, again, to make sure that you are trying to find an existing task. When you have the task or you've created a new task, the agent application code just needs to insert the message with, in this case, the contents of the email. And then the final step really is just setting the task status to ready, right? It's just a field. And when the application does this, the task is more or less handed over to the agent platform. So it just indicates to the agent platform that there's a task that is now ready to run. And so the agent platform will take care of scheduling that task in the background and running it as soon as it can. It also means you don't need to dispatch anything from the AL code. It doesn't block anything to set the task status to ready. Like, you can do it in a UI session as well. It's fine. And the platform will just pick this up. It will do some checks like that, how many tasks are already running for your environment, what's your quota, and other things. But then as soon as it can, it will actually start executing the task. And executing the task is actually many different steps that happen. We can see some examples here. So the first thing that the agent platform will do is always analyze any new input messages that haven't been analyzed before for harmful content. So the platform will automatically analyze any input for harmful content, and if any harmful content is ever detected, the task is blocked, and it stops, and that's it, and the agent will make that very clear in the timeline, and it will not proceed with that task. After it analyzes the input messages, well, it starts interacting with the UI via the logical API that Christian mentioned before. And what is it that it's doing when it's interacting with the UI? Well, it's processing the instructions, right? It knows what it's done already as part of this task. It knows what it sees on the page, and it will just make decisions about what the next step is, and it will always record that, so it knows also what to do next. And this is purely based on the agent's instructions in the agent record. The agent platform also automatically will handle user interventions. So user interventions is what we commonly refer to any situation where a user needs to go and click on something in the timeline. For example, reviewing an incoming or outgoing mail is an intervention. You could also, in the instructions, say, oh, in this specific situation, you should ask for help. And then it will just create a user intervention request. Something that could also happen, especially depending on the extensions you have installed and your permissions, it might run into a permission issue, right? It might try to do something on a sales quote, but because there's some extension and maybe some new field and it doesn't have permissions to that field, it might not be able to proceed, and it will surface that as well and ask for help, and then some user can go and kind of fix that. And this is all just handled automatically. There's no involvement necessary here from the application side. Finally, well, depending on your agent, but this is an email example, it will produce an output message, and it will also handle the review process of that message, making sure to ask someone to review if that is the way this agent is set up, and making sure the message is reviewed. And that's where the task execution kind of ends on the platform side. And then we go back to the application. So just like the application checks for incoming mails, it would also need to check for reviewed output messages that are ready to be sent. And so when the application finds one of these, it is then back to the application to run some logic and actually send the email, because as I mentioned before, the agent platform does not handle the communication aspect. And then the email is sent, and finally, for good measure, messages do have a status field that you can set from review to sent, so you can also make sure that you don't send the same output message twice. And yeah, this is a very maybe simplified view, but hopefully it gives you kind of an idea of what is expected from an agent application when developing one versus what the platform just handles automatically. And so to recap the responsibilities, on the application side, we have the whole agent configuration story. So creating your own profile, deciding what makes sense for the agent to see or not to see for if you're creating one, and your permission sets, providing a setup page and this whole setup experience, and probably the most important thing, the instructions, right? The instructions are like the core of an agent. And then it is also up to the application to decide, well, when do I create a task? Maybe you create an agent where people just create a task manually, that's totally fine. Maybe you want to have email integration or some other integration. That is completely up to each application. And then processing any output messages, whether these are then sent by email or placed somewhere else in a share or something. And the agent platform, on the other hand, provides, first of all, this whole agent task pane timeline user experience with the interventions and everything else. And it handles all the execution of an agent task, detecting harmful content, interacting with the UI, handling intervention requests, and creating all the output messages. So hopefully this has given you an initial idea of how these things work. And actually, before we go there, one last quick demonstration. Yeah, let's look at some AL code, just to exemplify what I've spoken about. This is some code from our sales order agent. Please keep in mind, this is still all changing. We are still in the process of refactoring certain things. Some of these methods, interfaces, etc., that you see here are probably going to be a bit different by the time this is public. But still, it should still give you an idea of how things work. So one thing we didn't touch on is what happens before you create the agent record. Because when you saw Erida set up the agent, it started with this sort of dashed line and a plus icon, right? And when that happens, you don't actually have an agent record. No one has created this agent record yet. No one has set it up. And so the way you get that to show up, for example, is any app that provides an agent has to extend this agent metadata provider enum with your own value, and you give it a name. And the important part is that it expects you to implement certain interfaces. So there's like the agent factory and agent metadata and agent validation, though agent validation has a default implementation. But so the first thing to do is to actually extend this enum and implement these interfaces. Again, these interfaces are subject to change, but we can have a look. So in this example, we have just one code unit that implements both of these interfaces. And here is where you provide some of the information. For example, you can decide what initials does your agent have. There's also the distinction. You can provide initials that show up only when an agent can be set up versus the initials used for an agent that has been set up. This can be useful if you want to allow multiple instances of the same agent in the same company so that you can distinguish them, right? For example, you could say SO1 and SO2 as your different initials. Similar to the initials, you provide whatever page is supposed to be opened when the agent is going to be set up. And here we can also distinguish between a first-time setup and maybe a subsequent setup of an existing agent. In this case, we're using the same initials and same setup page for both situations, but it's flexible. And you also have the summary page ID, which in the case of the sales order agent shows the KPIs that you saw earlier, that Erida showed you about the time saved, etc. This is also something that you would implement in your own agent application and find some meaningful KPIs. And you can also decide whether you want to actually show this sort of agent avatar with the plus sign. So for example, it might be very common that you check, well, do I already have an agent of my type in this company? And if I do, I'm not going to show you the plus sign because I only want you to create one. Otherwise, you can potentially allow them to create multiple instances if it makes sense for your use case. And then agents are also always tied to a Copilot capability, meaning that if that Copilot capability is disabled in the product, in the environment by an admin or someone, then all the agents with that capability are automatically disabled as well. So an agent is tied to a capability. And there's a few other things like, for example, being able to override the agent task message page that shows up when you want to review a message. You can create your own page that maybe is more meaningful to the type of messages that your agent handles. And here, just as some final examples, we discussed the fact that the agent application has to create tasks and then also mark them as sent and actually send them. And for example, the sales order agent task, sales order agent app creates a background task when you activate the agent that periodically is checking a mailbox and is also checking for new output messages that are ready. And here's, for example, the code. So as I mentioned before, it will check whether we have a task based on the conversation ID of this email inbox. If we do, it will just add this email as a new message to an existing task. Otherwise, it will create a new task. And finally, we can see, for example, here, it's really very basic, right? You filter the agent task messages of type reviewed, and then if you manage to send it, you just finally update the status to sent, and that's kind of it. So yeah, there is quite a bit to think about and implement if you want to create your own agent application. Actually, this is not all. If we look at all these files, there's quite a bit going on in this agent and quite a bit of customization and the setup experience, building the instructions. So it can take a while to create an agent application. And of course, sometimes someone just wants to write some instructions, try it out, see if your idea even works. You don't particularly care about that there's an email or not an email, just want to create a task, an agent, try things out. And I'll hand it over to Christian to talk about that.
Yes, thank you, Esteban. Yeah, so as Esteban explained, there's like two parts to it, and you all know very well how to write AL code, which is the big blue box here. There are some nuances about how you register an agent, as Esteban explained, and delegate tasks to it. But the heart of an agent really is in the green box, mainly, I would say, in the instructions. So you might be wondering, how do instructions look and how do you develop them? And to show you that, I'm also going to introduce you to the agent playground, which is an experience inside the app where you can change instructions and try and create a task and just iterate really quickly. You actually saw it, Esteban showed it once, and I'm going to show it multiple times. But because this is just data at the end of the day, we don't need to redeploy apps, we can just iterate very fast. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so let me go to the agents. This page again, and I'm going to create a new agent on the fly here. So we see we have this menu called Playground. This is not for regular users, it's more for developers at this point. I can create an agent, and I give it a name, like this would be the username. So let's say, well, the scenario I'm going to use is the policy checker that you also saw in the keynote. So an agent that is supposed to research a little bit, like look through all sales orders and see if they comply with the policy. So I call it policy checker. And I already have one, so I'm going to call it policy checker 2, policy checker. And it says type no code agent. It's going to be called playground agent. This is the code we're running here is from Friday, and it's already been changed. So if I was to run it against the latest, it would say playground agent. Okay, so create one. And so now we have a new agent. Now we have 4 agents. And like this is like a user, right? So I need to give it some permission sets, otherwise it can't do anything. And normally I wouldn't, but for playing with it, it's okay to give it super. Similarly, I need to assign a profile to it. What should it see when it logs in? Again, I would probably design a special purpose role center for it, so it can see, doesn't see a lot of things that might confuse it. But for playing with, I'm just going to give it business manager, which is the same profile that I'm using, and so it will see a lot of things on the role center. I can navigate to purchase orders, sales orders, customers, vendors, items, and many, many other things. Okay, so now let's enable it. And it takes me to this page. And then the initials, those are the 2-3 letters that it will show in that hexagon avatar. So let me call that PC2. Okay, good. I will activate it. And now I have an active agent. But what should it do? This is where the instructions come into play. And so let's give it some instructions. And I have a notepad here with some snippets. So the first one, can you read? Okay, yeah. I'm telling the agent, select a random sales order, draft a message with some details about that sales order. Okay. So now I have an agent, knows what to do. How do I start it? As Esteban explained, an agent will not do anything until it has a task. So I need to create a task. So this is a brand new agent, so it hasn't done anything yet, but under the playground, I can actually create a task. And in my particular scenario, I don't need to give it an input message. I just need to poke it, and it knows what it should do. But I need to give the task a title. Let's say, I'm going to call it Hello World task, because this is really a kind of a Hello World scenario. Good. So now, let's look at PC2 and see we have now a running task for this brand new agent. And so I'm just going to press F5 a few times here, because it'll save me some time. Otherwise it will come eventually. So let's see what it... Okay, now it's finished already. And so what it did was find a random sales order and write some details about it, just like I asked it to. Great. Thank you, agent. So let's go back to, I have a shortcut here to make it a little bit faster. Let's go back to my policy. Spelling mistake. Bet you saw that. I'm going to give it some more detailed instructions here, just to make it a little bit more realistic. So what I'm telling it is, please iterate all the sales orders. Select each row, while on the sales order page, the card page, check if the data on that page complies with the policies below. And if it doesn't, request a review of the user and describe how it violates one of the policies. And then close the page and move to the next row. And then the policies are total amounts, including VAT, higher than 10,000 are not allowed. And we don't sell to art schools, which are, of course, ridiculous policies, but it'll be clear in a moment why I chose those. So let's give it a task, just to start it, on the playground. And let's say, what should we call it? Check policies task. Okay. So while we're waiting for it to kind of start, let's go to the sales orders page, and it'll be clear why I chose those policies. Because we have 9 sales orders. The first one has a very high amount, including VAT or tax. This is US. And second one is fine, but the third one, the customer's School of Fine Art, which is arguably an art school. So what we would expect is that it would stop on the first one here and say, hey, here's a sales order that does not comply with policy. Let's see what it says. Yes, so this sales order does not comply with policy because the amount of 17,000 exceeds 10,000 as expected. Thank you, agent. I'll let you move on. So now, it will go on and hopefully skip the next one, and then any moment from now, it will stop on this one. Let's just give it a moment. Any moment now.
Elevator music.
What?
Elevator music.
Elevator music, yes. All right, so it stopped on this one, which is indeed the one for the School of Fine Art. Thank you, agent. I'll let you continue, and it will go through the rest, and it will not flag anymore. Great. Okay, so that's a little bit more realistic. But so the first 2 examples, the agent was just researching, reviewing, read-only. It didn't change anything in our database, in our environment. So to illustrate how it might do that, let's give it some different instructions. So I'm going to replace number 3 here, bullet 3, with a new. I'll delete the first one in a moment just so you can compare the two. So here, instead of requesting a review, I'm saying, please set this field, which is a new field I added on the sales order table, to violation plus what policy it violated. And if there were no policy violations, just set this value to none. And then I don't want you to stop and request a review from me anymore, so I'm going to delete this line. Oops. And now let's start that one. So let's say we call that set field task. So and while that runs, let me go back to the sales orders page. What you probably didn't notice was this new field that I added to the sales order table. So if I press F5 now, I should see I press F5 repeatedly, which you cannot see, but I am. And you can see that it's actually iterating through all the sales orders, checking whether they comply with the policy, and if they don't, or if they do, it will write the appropriate thing in that field. So while it's running, it still has four left. I think I can make it. So if we go to this task, what Esteban also showed was you can actually see the steps as they take place. So I'm continuously pressing F5 now, so you can see everything that the agent does. So it's really doing it live in a separate session that it is logged into. So let's see, it's very close to finish. So now it's finished. So stepping through those 9 sales orders, opening each one, setting the field value, closing it again. So 3 at minimum for each sales order. That's 27, plus a little bit more to start and stop, makes 33 steps. So the agent did 33 steps to do this piece of work. All right. So great. So it's doing everything I told it to do. But remember in the beginning I said agents are goal-seeking. You tell it what you want it to do, not how it should do it. We want to give the agent the flexibility, the empowerment to do it like it wants it to do it. But you can see in the instructions here, they are a little bit a mixed bag, I would say. The first line is fine. I'm just telling it to iterate all sales orders, which I'm not telling it to open the sales orders page. That would be very direct. Just relatively abstract. Iterate all the sales orders. But then I go into much more detailed instructions. Select a row, close the page, move to the next row. Very directed. Like, can we do better than that? So let's try. Instead of those instructions, let's try with shorter instructions. So now I'm saying, policy checker, I trust you. I want you to ensure that all sales orders comply with the policies. You should inform the user when a policy is violated. So I'm not being very specific about how it should do things. Let's start it. Let's call that more abstract task. Don't need an input message. And we started. So now, I actually don't know what it will do. I mean, it might request review each one by one, as the first scenario. It might produce an output message as in the hello world example. It might, what might it do? We'll see. I don't know what it will do. But it's actually already finished. And let's see what it did. Okay, so it chose to just summarize all the violations in one message, which is fine. It did what I told it to do. So what you can imagine, I think where we are headed with this, but it's not implemented yet, is that we give relatively abstract instructions to an agent, And then when it does something, it actually tries, we give it feedback. So in this case, we might say, thank you, agent. Next time, I would like it in a table format. And then maybe we'll do it right. Or if it doesn't do it right next time, I will again give it feedback, kind of reinforce, this is good. This, I want it to be slightly different. Kind of when you train a colleague at work where you, to some extent, let them loose, but you give continuous feedback on how they're doing. So maybe you noticed, I think, remember 33, that was how many steps it took to iterate through all sales orders in the previous task. But in this abstract task, it only took 3 steps. How can that be? Well, it's very easy to see what the agent did. So we can just open the log entries, and we can see that it started on the business manager role center, and then it clicked sales orders, and that's when it decided to create this output message with the violations. How can it do that? Well, it's because if we navigate to that page, all the things it needed were on this list page. So the names, so we will identify art schools, and the total amounts, you can also see those. So it realized on its own that it doesn't need to go into every single card, so it's actually cleverer than I was. Yeah, so I hope that gives you an intuition of how they really work and what they can do. So at this point, let's move on to look at the other agent that Microsoft is shipping, which is the Payables agent, Erida.
Yep, let's go into our last agent of the day. So for Payables agent, we know that every company has expenses. You need to pay your rent, pay your phone bill, pay your utilities, and so on. Oftentimes, those expenses arrive into your mailbox as PDF invoices, and yet again, we start that manual, tedious process, similarly to how it was for the sales order agent, when someone in your team has to go in and check that and download that PDF, open that side by side with Business Central, try to get all the right data from the PDF, put it into the fields that it needs to be, get the right accounts, match them up, make sure not to miss any data, not to mix any data. And all of that could be improved a lot, and that's exactly what the Payables agent does. It monitors, again, a designated mailbox for those incoming invoices, and once an email comes in, it can read the PDF, it can extract all the data that it needs from it by using Azure Document Intelligence, and then create a draft purchase in Business Central, and even map everything to the right accounts based on your company's accounting policies or the purchase history. And all of this happens automatically. A draft is ready for you to review, unless it needs a little bit of help finding the right account. In some cases, it might. So let's go and see how that works within Business Central. So I have this environment, which is polluted with so many agents because agents do a lot, and it's great to have a lot of them. Thanks to the initials that Esteban mentioned, I can tell all of them apart, and PA is my Payables agent. So if I click on it, the task pane shows again, and I can see the tasks that the Payables agent has been working on. We can also have a look at the configuration. Of course, I pre-activated this one. It's kind of similar to the sales order agent, where we have set it up to monitor an email account, and that's it really for the Payables agent. So let's go and have a look at the last task that it worked on. It has already completed it, but it's good to just see what happened. So similarly to the sales order agent, we started with an email. What was different here, though, was that we're not interested in the content, in the body of that email, as much as we are in the PDF that's included in it. And I have to play some elevator music while it opens up. Okay, you didn't hear me sing, that's good. So we see that the body is just something very generic, where we have received this email that says, thank you for purchasing from Graphic Design Institute. Please find the invoice attached to this email. And as we know, we can preview PDFs right in Business Central, so I can have a look at the PDF right here and see what is it really. So it's an invoice, again, if I zoom in a little, from Graphic Design Institute, and I can see that it includes logo design, a mousepad, prepaid vendor managed inventory lease, shipping fee, all good. So what did the agent do with this email that came in and with this PDF? I can have a look at the next step, where it actually finalized the draft e-document. But if I want to have a look at that draft e-document instead of the purchase invoice, of course I can do that right here in the action bar, open that e-document draft. So if I have a look at the e-document draft, I want a little bit more space, so I'll just collapse this pane and give myself some more space. What I can see in the page over here in the draft is that I have all the changes in here, and I have a preview of the PDF on the side, and I can make my fact box as wide or as narrow as I need it to be, and I can really have a look at them side by side, where it's logo design as we have it on the left, on the right, mousepad, prepaid vendor managed inventory. If I scroll a bit horizontally, we can see that the quantities, also match up. And what's more important, of course, as we said before, that for the sales order agent, it was able to map everything to the right customer. In this case, similarly, we're able, just from that email message, to map it to the right vendor based on the contacts. What's more important for the payables agent, though, is that it was able to find the right account to put everything into. So I can have a look at those one by one. For example, the logo design went into advertisement development, which is fair. Mousepad went into office supplies, also fair enough. And the prepaid vendor managed inventory lease for 12 months went into rent and leases. So it's really good at finding where things need to be. Shipping fee went into freight fees for goods. And I really didn't need to do anything because the agent figured all of this out by itself. And I can have a look and see that it's already done with this task, and all that it needed to do is finished. And similarly, for another task that it worked on, I can see this email from Eric, who is saying that they're pleased to have offered their consultancy services and for the impact our collaboration has had. Also finding the invoice attached to the email. And yet again, I can see that right here, can zoom in a little and look at all those lines, fair consultancy service, travels cost, technology infrastructure updates, all listed, all with their prices. And I can see how did the agent do with these? Well, just go to the next step right here, and I can have a look at the e-document, and I can see again, all of those are listed. If I want, I can view the PDF right on this page on the purchase invoice. Just to remind myself, what was it actually that was in the PDF? Well, consultancy services, travel costs, miles traveled, all of those are in here as well. And yet again, the agent has done an excellent job at finding all the right accounts to put everything into. And I didn't even need to help it this time. So that's about it for the agent.
Thank you, Erida. Yeah, so what you've seen is the first two agents that we provide. The sales order agent, which is in public preview in mostly English-speaking countries. What we're doing now is making it available in more and more countries. That will come with every minor, more and more countries. So for example, for Germany, we need to test that it works, that it can kind of converse in German, and that it can work with the German localization. So it's mainly, our job is mainly to test. And when we're confident it works, we will release it and you can use it. That will come. We'll also be adding more capabilities. For example, ability to handle PDF attachments in emails. For the payables agent, it is currently in private preview with around 20 partners who are providing feedback on it. Here it's a little bit more early days. We are adding more capabilities. One of the big ones we will be adding soon is ability to match with purchase orders, which is a way many companies operate. They create a purchase order first. And then we plan to have it in a public preview very, very soon in select countries, meaning probably English-speaking countries, because of the test effort to roll it out to more countries. So stay tuned for that. And we'll, of course, also add more agents over time. But what you might be wondering is, when can you create your own agents? And I just want to say we are working really, really hard to enable you to do that. We will have a private preview of the agent playground, what I showed you, very soon in July. And this will be for a very small group of partners, because we want to control it. But then October is when we expect to have it in public preview so that you can all play with it. So have a bit of patience still here. I want to end with some reflection on why we think AI agents are such a big deal. And of course, it has to do with automation. All the tasks that are relatively repetitive that humans spend their time on today, can we automate them? And it's not like automation is a new thing. We've been automating for years, mainly by writing AL code. But as we know, that is both expensive and time-consuming. You need developers who write the AL code. They need to think about all conceivable situations that can happen, like what if the address format is slightly off? What if there are no items available on stock or whatever? They have to think about all these things and write code to handle them. And it also means that it can become fragile, because what if something unexpected happens, which is where agents are better. But as a result of this, what we've done in the past many years is automate simple processes, like linear processes where it's kind of mechanic what needs to happen. We can automate those. But what AI agents is going to do is really dramatically change this. So as we've seen, agents are intelligent. We give them the whole UI of Business Central. And then we just tell it what we want, and it figures out how to do it. So it can overcome situations much more easily than if you were to write AL code for it. And so what we think will happen, not in the very short term, but eventually, is that we will be able to delegate whole areas of responsibility to AI agents, like handling all customer communications, like handling all invoice processing, etc., etc. So this is the direction we are going, and it's pretty exciting. And with that, we have 15 minutes for Q&A, and there are T-shirts for the first ones as well.
Can you throw that over?
AJ.
I don't want to throw it.
Yeah. Oh, you need the microphone.
Who's first?
We have the cube.
Okay.
Okay, you don't want a T-shirt.
No, I don't.
Fine.
One question. So, you hear me? Okay. You have the purchase order, and you give the general ledger account number, and then you can match it. When will it be like that you don't give the agent this knowledge, that the agent understand really the general ledgers, and then you don't have to give them the information in the purchase order, that he can only matches and make it?
I'm not sure I follow. So what the reader showed is we get an invoice in, and we create a brand new purchase invoice for it. And so we transfer all the lines that were on the PDF, and we also determine the right accounts.
Yeah, but you in the purchase order, you already give him the accounts, and you only have to match it, and then he knows the accounts. Yeah. So my question is, when do the agents really understand the bookkeeping and know this will be the account, so the really understanding of the financial process? Thank you.
Yeah, so we can talk a lot about that, but it's also going to get a little bit detailed. But I'll give you 1 minute summary of what our thinking is around the payables agent. So basically, we will use what you saw here was we use the LLM to come up with the right accounts, what we think are the right accounts. What is coming very soon is some indication in the UI that tells the user how confident we are that this is the right account. The mentality we have here, the way of thinking we have here is, you know how to, let's imagine this scenario. You get dropped into a company that has existed for years, and you are asked to handle the next invoice that comes in. Can you do it? Yes, you can do it, because you can look in the history, how have invoices previously been handled in this company. It takes you a lot of work to do it, but you can do it. You don't want to do those kinds of things. Agents don't mind. They will actually be able to scan earlier invoices that look similar, and this is where we get the essence from. And so basically, in a way, you can think of it as the users are training it. They are saying, this is the right account, next time it will know this. AJ, now it's your turn.
All right, so a couple of questions. I'll ask one, maybe yes, give it away and then come back for another one. From a visibility perspective and from a performance perspective, at some point, the penalty of having too many of those agents is overflow. So from an interface perspective, are you thinking about creating some kind of a scroll bar if you have too many Then the other part of it is from a performance perspective. How does that impact? Have you kind of done any testing at scale that says after so many agents, we're expecting performance degradation? Or is it really just like another user session and it's really not impacting anything significantly?
You answered it yourself. So it is really just a user session. And you know, we have customers with thousands of users. And so having 10 agents is fine. It's not going to be a problem. On the first
can
questions
take
about the
the
user
first,
experience, do you
yeah,
want to say?
the first part. We initially designed the task pane using only our first agent. And of course, as we get more agents, you see more avatars popping up. Of course, we work with accessibility. It all will either reflow nicely, but of course, we'll also add the ability in the Copilot pane itself to choose which agent you're looking at. So you don't always need to go back to the role center and click on those avatars, even from the task pane, which you can just open from the bar on top, which opens the Copilot pane. You can switch between chats and agents, and then when you're in the agents part of that pane, you can switch in the future between the different agents that you have running.
As a user, could I maybe hide some of those if I don't want to see them, but others maybe want to see them?
So let me also give another perspective on that, because the way this is going is users will do less of the grunt work. They will be more like managers of agents. We're talking a little bit into the future now, a couple of years. And so what we are playing with, what we are imagining is a UI. How would a UI look if you are kind of a manager of agents? So what we have now is will do just fine in the short term, but we're also thinking about how it might look longer term.
Yes, a question about spam emails and sales order agents. Can sales order agents have any mechanism how exclude spam emails from process?
Yeah. So the way it works today, okay, I'll say how it works today and what you can imagine us adding later. So the way it works today is the sales order agent will read every single email that comes into your mailbox so that you don't have to manually flip back and forth between Outlook and Business Central. So everything will be brought in, and you will then get this warning that Erida showed that says this is probably not relevant, and you can dismiss it. So one thing we have discussed is, you know, in Outlook you can have indications of spam, of like they might end in your junk folder, but they might actually not. And we can actually use that information. So what we might do is have a setting that says, don't include those. But it comes at a risk, because what if you miss it? Like it's the same with your junk folder, right? Sometimes a valid email ends up there, so it's a trade-off. Okay, yeah, so there's a lot of questions, a lot of hands.
We have seen a little bit of AL code, we have seen a little bit of prompting in the client, but when you think about outside of Business Central, when you want to create an agent, you go to Copilot Studio. Why the Business Central agents are created directly in the client?
I had a feeling that question would come. So you can create agents in Copilot Studio, and you can create agents in Business Central. And it's not like one excludes the other. I mean, Copilot Studio has a lot of flexibility. You can integrate with, I think there are more than 1,000 connectors they have. So you can do a lot there. But there's also benefits in having an integrated experience. Like, for example, the delivery mechanism of an extension, an app source, and the timeline that you see, which is fully integrated, has some benefits too. So what we will do, though, is, you know, if you're following this space, there's a new protocol called A2A, agent to agent. So you can imagine, and this is what we will pursue, that a Copilot Studio agent can interact with a Business Central agent, so you can get the best of both worlds. All right. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question of a little bit under the hood. I'm
Could you
curious.
speak up?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm curious how exactly agent interacts with data. Do we need to create function for each table? How does it interact with custom tables if we want to build custom agent for our solution?
It interacts directly with the UI. So if anything, you might want to create pages that show all the relevant data. So which is also, it can also be, you know, beneficial if you haven't if you're building an agent that actually needs data from many different places. It can also help if you can maybe create some pages that kind of bring this data together. potentially, but I mean, it interacts with it via pages and via the UI.
I got it. But for example, it was shown that it can select random sales order. How it know random from the UI? I'm curious.
It's an LLM, I guess it just
It's the same as if you
picks something.
ask ChatGPT, here's a list of things, pick a random one. That's essentially what it does at the end of the day. Okay, can you catch? Sorry.
No, just a simple question. I wanted to know if it does an integration with any approval workflows or potential external ISVs.
Of approval workflows of external ISVs. I mean, so we have some built-in workflow, approval workflows in Business Central already in the base app. And so what it might do, but not in our scenario, but what it might do is prevent the agent from pressing the button, like pressing the post button, let's say, because like a user would also not be able to, and an agent is just a user. And so it would get stuck there until somebody actually approves, and then it would be able to continue. As with respect to integrating with third-party solutions, that's a bigger question. But I mean, we saw what extensions, like if extensions add fields and buttons, to some extent it can just use those if it understands what they are for. But there's a limit to how much you can integrate at this point. Mm-hmm.
To the left.
Okay. Sorry to the people in the back.
So this looks wonderful, and I can imagine all kinds of different scenarios where this would really help a lot. But I can also see that the performance of this probably also narrows that down a lot. Do you have any, like, are you going to work on making this faster? Because that really limits the use cases for my particular point of view.
Yeah. Do you want to ask? I've talked a lot. Answer.
Well, in terms of the agent runtime, I mean, we are restricted by the LLM response times. For example, we do have work planned to compact the history of the things that have happened as part of a task periodically. But of course, if you have large pages with large numbers of fields and many steps, ultimately the prompts that get sent are going to be pretty heavy in terms of tokens, and it could be slightly slow. So right now we're also really thinking mainly about the agents as something that runs just in the background, and whenever you're needed, it will ask you, but it's not currently, at least not with the two agents we have currently, meant as a situation where you click something and you just stare and wait, and then you click on something again. Because yes, I mean, it can definitely happen that it's not only slow, but like I mentioned earlier, there are going to be restrictions in place also because performance, we will not be running 1,000 agent tasks in parallel for an environment. So if you have a lot of tasks, a few of them might run at the same time. There's also the whole quota around AI usage, and so sometimes maybe you run out of daily quota or something, TBD. But it's more like of a background experience at this point, for sure.
Good.
So from what we've seen, I'm just going to a conclusion that basically you're going to have custom role centers with custom pages that are provided to the agents to have them have the ability to improvise, but for anything that concerns bigger amounts of data, you expect us to supply it with like custom actions that it can take to actually work through it. Because in your example, it was going through the orders, and you were basically telling it, open this page, and then go through them, which works fine when you have 10 orders, but we've got customers with like 50,000 orders, and you can't expect it to cycle through a page and work through it. So at that point, you probably want us to then implement actions like check orders for availability or whatever.
Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting question. How much should you change the app for the agents, and how much should the agents just do like a human would do? If you have a process today where you need to do something with 50,000 customers, what do users do? What do humans do? I bet the agent could do the same. It would probably search or filter and so on. But that doesn't exclude, of course, that you can make custom pages that would, actually what we did, what we didn't show, but for sales order agent, we did create at least one page for item availability, which is the way, for a given item, for a given time, how much will I have on hand at this point? And this can be achieved by clicking a lot around in the UI, but we actually ended up creating a custom page for that because it was more efficient and more reliable.
So just a small follow-up, does that mean that the agent actually can interact with the filters of a page?
Yep.
How is the licensing going to be? Are there special agent licenses or full users? Or
Yeah, so the agents don't require licenses. So there's no license requirements. But the way we will use as a licenses, yes, and any user can interact with them. So there will be a charge, but that is based on how much they do, not on licenses. How we are going to measure how much they do? So there's it's all documented, but every incoming mail, the unit of the currency here is messages, and every message currently is 1 cent. So an incoming mail, I think it's 2 cents. Correct me if I'm wrong. Every outgoing, mail, 2 cents. Every quote created, 5 cents. Every order created, 5 cents. So if you, super like 2 rounds, will amount to 14, 18, or whatever. I cannot do the 28. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It has been defined, so you can just go to the website to Microsoft Learn and see the price model. How are we doing on time?
1 minute left.
Under 1 minute left.
Okay.
One question.
Hello. Yeah. Nice. For example, are the instructions from the Microsoft Standard Agents extensible or adjustable? I mean, for example, handling individual new fields in a different way?
So I didn't catch the second part.
The instructions from the Microsoft Standard Agents, are those extensible or adjustable?
So they are not extensible or adjustable. What we want to do that, we want to enable that so that you can actually provide your own snippet, separate, that will also guide how the agent does something, does its work.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
We're on time. Thank you.